Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show, the top morning show in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines and, most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I will only speak to transportation professionals on this show, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take all of this information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Corey Buchan, happy hump day over on YouTube. Dylan Turner over on YouTube, as well as Tony Darnell, my man. Good morning to you, sir. He's also over on YouTube. You guys, I go live on YouTube because from what I've been told by everybody who tunes in, that it's exponentially better stream quality over on YouTube than over on LinkedIn. But enough about that. Enough on my soapbox, you guys. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. We're going to talk about accessorials. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff and kind of streamlining a lot of these things, because accounting gets you in a ton of trouble with your carriers and your customers, and it just can be extremely time consuming. So I have Marina Brown on the show, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about all of this. Marina, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, absolutely, Chris. I am super excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
No, I'm looking forward to this because, accessorials are such a pain in the ass sometimes, and, keeping them all in track and everything. But, before we get into any of that stuff, like, how did you get your start in freight, Marina? What brought you into this industry?
Actually, my first experience with transportation, I got a job at Warner Enterprises. I'm sure you guys know the freight carrier, who also has a logistics division. And so I led part of their development, product, and data science teams on the logistics side, working very closely with carrier and shipper reps, very, very close into the whole logistics experience and operations, and got to see a lot of what we're doing right now firsthand.
Yeah, no, I think that is like that. So what happened? Like, what experience did you have where you're like, all right, I got to go out and start this up, and I got to get after this and do this on my own?
Yeah, so after I worked with at Warner, I also ended up working with an awesome startup that specializes in factoring here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And one of the things that was on that we frequently did was having to co-carriers around different accessorials and additional surcharges that we got on the invoices from different carriers. Our goal was to pay within 24 hours, but oftentimes you didn't know whether certain accessories were going to get approved or not. And so we wanted to make sure that we were going to get paid for those. And so my role wasn't necessarily to be helping people or to be as part of the operations and to pay. It was different, but because that needed to get done, I had to just pick up the phone and call a lot of logistics companies. Hey, was this detention for real? Was this liftgate happening? It really happened. And at the time, I remember thinking, like, there has to be like an automated process in which you can actually communicate all of these charges and actually validate those with different freight brokers or shippers. And there wasn't. So one day, myself and my co-founder were like, we should do that. Spend some time actually validating whether or not this is a real problem. Turns out that there's hardly a supply chain company out there that will tell you that they do not get beat up by accessorials. One, with all of the additional charges they end up paying, but two, all of the human talent that actually goes into literally sitting on the phone, arguing with carriers, arguing with shippers, just messing business operations purely because of those surcharges.
Have you found that carriers, and I'm not blaming carriers for this, because I think to me, accessorials is something you just shouldn't mess around with. Like, as a broker, it doesn't take much to send a revised rate confirmation with a lumper fee or any of that stuff immediately in it. More times than not, I would argue 99% of the time, if there's going to be an accessorial charge prior to the load even picking up, because a lot of these facilities, Marina, that people are delivering into that have lumper fees, it's not a surprise that there's a lumper fee there. The amount might be different, but again, like it shouldn't take much to do this, because customers, shippers always pay for that stuff. And any broker that's out there that's trying to make it a challenge, they're just trying to pad their own pockets. I'm going to call a spade here. This is not as challenging as a lot of people make it out to be.
You would think so, but I have found that not to be the experience. So first of all, like if you think about it, like when you're booking freight, conversations happen so quickly, right? The negotiations with the carrier, what gets communicated, what is communicated from the shipper to you as a freight broker, right? And that's one of the other things that actually we believe is a huge problem, is the multi-channel communication that really doesn't happen between carriers, freight brokers, and shippers. But like what gets communicated to you is ultimately what you're trying to get communicated to the carrier in a very fast-paced environment. And sometimes all of that information does not come through, or you just don't know. Like one of the things I would like to think we know is what you said, Chris, is that, hey, like you deliver freight frequently to these facilities, you should know that there's a lumper. You might not know what it is, but there's no tools, right? A lot of that information is in the back of our minds, right? There's no tools today to say, hey, you're driving into that facility and it's 99% certain that you're going to have a lumper, or that facility frequently delays carriers 2.5 hours, or there's a lift gate associated with that freight. And because of that, we forget to put it on. And then the carrier gets there. Now they have a lumper that needs to get paid, but they need approval. And that approval now initiates a very manual process that we found through our research, actually, that for one accessorial to get approved during transportation, it literally takes 6 people across 4 companies to touch it.
That's insane to me. Like, I like, to me, when it comes down to it, and again, what you're doing is very, very beneficial, because when I'm out here moving freight, because the joys of people listening to this podcast is, I don't talk in theory, you guys. This is shit that I actually do every single day. That, like, my day job is a freight brokerage. I own a freight brokerage. That's my day job. I've been doing this for a very long time, and more times than not, when it comes to accessorials, when it comes to lumpers, it's a failure on the broker to notify the carrier that there's going to be a lumper or the amount, because it is as simple as this, Marina. A customer just needs to see the lumper receipt and they're going to approve that amount. It's as simple as that. The broker just needs to, hey, $55 at Food Lion or $55 at Kroger. Hypothetical example, but we all know that Kroger charges lumpers. That you submit that to your customer approves it, you add it to the rate confirmation, you resend the revised rate confirmation with the lumper on it, and you're done. And that's as complex as it needs to be. But laziness starts to creep in, Marina. Laziness is what it boils down to. In my opinion, Chris Jolly's opinion is it is laziness by the broker to not add it to the rate confirmation, to send that revised number over. And then who knows, maybe these guys are just hoping somebody forgets about that amount, and then they just make extra money on the load.
Well, and you have to think about it, right? They don't make money. Hopefully they don't make money off of detention and lumpers, right? You're making money from booking loads. And when you have goals to meet on a daily basis, and you have to book like 11, 12, 13, however many loads you're booking on that day, you're not thinking about the lumper, right? You're thinking like, how am I going to get that next load on my queue taken care of? So, and that's where systems come in, though, right? Technology. At the end of the day, we want carrier reps and shipper reps to be focused on bringing that revenue, not necessarily to deal with like manual activities around booking or taking care of accessorials. And so why not leave that to technology to handle?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And this is another one of those steps in the process that should be automated, right? At the end of the day, like and same thing when it comes down to like detention and, pre-approvals. like a lot of this stuff. I just look at it like this from from my perspective. If a carrier has a layover for whatever reason,
Right.
their relationship is with me, the broker. Their relationship
Yep.
isn't with the shipper. So if there's any additional fees, they just need my approval. And then for like
Right.
that added additional steps in there, I just think that it's a giant waste of time from
Right.
some people's standpoints, where because I just look at it as if there's a detention on a load,
Yep.
I'm going to send over a revised rate confirmation right away. And then if my customer doesn't pay me for it, I need to question, do I want to work with that customer anymore
Right.
at the end of the day, you know? So I think though that like, but then again, you know, when you're looking at, we'll go reefer freight, for example, there are lumpers, there's pallet
Yep.
exchanges, there are additional accessorials that get added on,
Right.
and it can get messy if, you know, maybe a driver forgot to submit the receipt or had lost the
Right.
receipt or something like that. Then things can kind of start to go haywire.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? Like, I actually am working, or I was working last week with a shipper out of Colorado, actually, and they move freight from overseas. And think about like the pain that such accessorials exert on shippers as well. So they ended up with about 30% on top of what they had originally contracted in the
Mhm.
merge and detention, and other like port taxes and such. But they it wasn't their fault that the freight sat there because of the lack of coordination between their freight forwarder and the carrier that was supposed to pick up the freight. But the freight sat there for close to 2 weeks, and they ended up with a lot of charges. Now, obviously it diminishes a lot of the profitability on their freight, and that's not a single example, right? This happens every day. Ultimately, we want to avoid that surprise, both
Mhm.
for shippers and for brokers. Let me tell you that, hey, you are likely going to experience additional charges, and I am going to help you know what those are. And the better part is when they happen, I will be letting you know about it in real time, right? So not handing you a bill either like right before I deliver the load and demand that you pay all of these accessorials same day, or I will hold your load hostage, because we've seen that happen as well.
Yeah.
But I will let you know as your freight's sitting at the port that, hey, today your detention or your demurrage is going to be $60. Here's the total bill so far, right? So at least you're giving people a proactive financial update to where when the final bill actually arrives, they know what to expect,
Yeah.
and they can plan financially, because at the end of the day, that's their life and blood, and they want to make sure that they have the opportunity to plan ahead.
No, I agree with that. And I think like, because that's a, you know, when you're mentioning talking to a shipper, for example, like, you know, if there's a co-packer out there and, you know, they're making for multiple brands and they're handling all of the transportation and everything for those multiple
Yeah.
brands, and each individual, you know, distribution center all has different accessorial charges and lumper fees and everything else that go onto it.
Right.
That the data behind that, I think is because like I would want to know that is hey, FYI, if you, instead of sending out two 20 pallet loads, you know, you
Right.
should send out, you know, or, excuse me, two 10 pallet partials or whatever that looks like. It costs you less to ship one full truckload, you know, and you can make better transportation decisions
Right.
at that point to get it in there. And
Yeah.
then again, cleaner invoices, because I think one thing, people like manufacturers and stuff, they judge, you know, different warehousing on overall fees. What's coming in there? Are they loading them fast enough? Are they offloading them fast enough? They want to know these things. That's why the KPI aspect of things are so important to that decision, because a lot of
Right.
companies, they don't want their brands to have a negative connotation out there in the market. And if they're
Right.
using a third party co-packer or a third party warehouse to
Yeah.
manufacture, label, whatever that looks like, they need to know that data. So this is like
Yeah.
where that helps so much. It paints such a
Yes.
clear picture.
Yeah. That, and we started talking about the carriers at the beginning, but think about the impact on carriers as well. It's not just about that. Hey, you have a detention, but that detention may be stopping you from getting your next load, right?
Mhm.
And that, people, carriers pay fines on those. It ruins customer relationships or freight broker relationships. And it's like, in our day and age with the technology that we have, it's avoidable. And either carriers ought to get paid for a mistake that was made, or they need to be warned so that they can make proactive decisions. Like, from conversations that we've had, about 70% of detention in the industry actually does not get paid out to carriers. And if
That's
you
not surprising at all, actually.
Yeah, and if you
Yeah.
sat at the facility for 6, 7 hours and you miss your next load, and you are a mom and pop carrier, then that costs you, dinner at the table for
Mhm.
the next week.
No, I agree. I agree with that, Marina. And again, I'm not going to sit here and advocate for anybody to do anything, but I will put it this way: if I was a truck driver and I sat somewhere for 6 or 7 hours, whether it's a shipper
Right,
or a receiver, we'll call it Chris Jolly Trucking sits there,
right,
and the broker says that there was no detention paid on that load, Chris Jolly, the trucker, is going to call that facility and ask them about that. Hey, I was informed that there was
right.
no detention paid on this. I sat there for 6 hours. Uh, Tim Thomas, fictitious name, signed off on my bills that I was there from 8 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. What's going on?
Yeah.
I think some truckers might be, at least Chris Jolly Trucking would make a point to find out if there was actual accessorials paid on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we're looking at doing at Moniva is actually providing that three and sometimes four-way communication channel between carriers, brokers, shippers, and
Mhm.
including factoring companies in the mix, because at the end of the day, they oftentimes have to pay the bill to the carrier. But to me, it's a matter of being proactive and being on time or real time, right? If I can get the information from that carrier that they have detention, pass it on to the broker, and without like two or three different handoffs happening at that broker, actually present that information to the shipper in real time as well. Sometimes you can alert the right personnel so that they can say, so that you can say, hey, you're about to start, you know, this is going to start costing you.
Yeah.
You are now paying an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of detention. Do something and prioritize the unloading of that carrier. That is information that today we don't get, or it's information that's very manual, right? Because the carrier has to call in into the brokerage, someone has to pick up the phone or read the email. From there, you actually have to communicate with the shipper rep. The shipper rep has to sometimes get an approval from their manager, and then you calling the customer. But then it's an hour and a half later. Simple to automate, right? Those workflows. I mean, I say simple. There's a lot of actual decisions and intelligence that has to go into all of this, but it's doable. And by providing people that type of information, you actually facilitate the later payment flow between the carrier, the broker, and the shipper.
So how do you see, are you guys using, because obviously AI comes to top of my mind when with a lot of this stuff, right? Because like I'm of the old school, like I want to automate everything to a point, right? Like I don't
Okay.
ever want to automate a carrier's experience with my company or a customer's experience with my company. I want them to talk to me. I want a human emailing them back. Yes, I understand both sides of this. I don't need to hear how AI is going to, make everything better. But I actually want to build a company with real human beings in it, not bots. But
Yep.
there are certain components of my job that technology and AI should be doing that. Because
Okay.
again, billing accuracy, I think, is probably one of the biggest hindrances of most organizations that they're not
Yeah.
even aware of, because they just go back and forth via email and everything else, where I feel like you could use AI. I mean, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, Marina, because I know
Sure.
you're very passionate about AI. How can AI come in and help clean up people's billing, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that first of all, by the way, I'm in the process of putting together a whole series of articles that hopefully I'll turn into videos as well around how AI is going to be applicable in supply chain, anything from obviously billing and accessorials, but we're talking routing optimization, network optimization, telematics, fleet management, and all of that. So stay tuned for that one. But specifically to your question, one of the things that I absolutely agree, right? A lot of brokerages think that technology is their differentiator, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily a true statement. You often hear people, brokerages say like, hey, our business is very different from everyone else, so we're going to build our own TMS, or we're going to build our own insert here, the technology. And I think, recent events over the last year or so have shown us that you can have the best technology and still not perform well, right? It's
Say that
the
again.
people.
Can you say that again? I'm being sarcastic. Sorry.
Well, but it's the truth, right? It's the
It is.
people that at the end of the day build the relationships, and these relationships build your business. So we don't want to remove that relationship building from your business. But what we want to be able to do is there's mundane and mundane experiences that you don't necessarily, it's not a relationship building opportunity. It's a trust building opportunity. And when I say trust, it means the carrier needs help and you're there to help them, right? And if that help means that you have, for example, a voice assistant that picks up the phone for you and it helps that carrier with whatever issue they have without necessarily involving your human counterpart, and helps that carrier in the moment, and the carrier leaves with, hey, either I now have an approval on that lumper, or I know what my next steps are in order to get unloaded or whatever, then that is the trust that you need between the carrier and the broker, because at the end of the day, job gets done and communication's there. So yes, absolutely. Like, AI is not there to replace humans. You still need those relationships. But for example, understanding some of the rules and applying those rules that exist between a shipper and a broker, so that when you approve a carrier lumper at a facility, or other permits or whatever, right? You're moving alcohol or specific foods, and you know what the agreement is between the shipper and a broker, and you don't need 2 or 3 people to actually say, yeah, I rubber stamp this, right? And your AI counterpart, Copilot, actually understands the rules, knows what has been decided in the past, and can now take all of that information and make the decisions and present it either to the carrier or to the shipper automatically. That I feel like that's beautiful and that's simple, right? It does not, it's not necessarily the relationship building part of the experience.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, Marina. And I think like one thing that is often overlooked is when you're building a business, you understand this because you're a co-founder. I've been bootstrapping for the past 4 years. It's not as easy as making a social media post about how you're just crushing it out there, you guys. Like, yeah, I think people tend to forget that it costs a lot of money to do things, and when you're really trying to formulate your company, you might not have the capital to spend to hire a 6-figure salary. You might not have that capital. You need to find workarounds to get to that level to build your business up. And that's where I think technology can help expedite some people's journeys, because like the human aspect of business, it's very challenging. It's very challenging to do that because you know what? You got human emotions that come into it. And the reality is it's dollar in, dollar out. You guys, when you're actually building a business, all right, if you make $10,000 in revenue, that's all you have to spend, unless you want to get into copious amounts of debt via credit card, because lines of credit don't just miraculously get thrown at you when you're building a company up. And, you're going to have a lot of personal guarantees associated with your business. So how do you elevate your game? How do you, without driving yourself nuts? because
Yep.
that's another component of this as well that comes in, because you could sit there and stare at a spreadsheet all day long with
Right.
accessorial fees and charts about
Yep.
what company's getting paid this, what customer got approved on that. You could do that all day long. And guess what? You look up, you didn't make any sales that day. You didn't move
Right.
any freight that day.
Yep.
You didn't make any money that day.
Yeah, like back to the point of actually humans, right? Like there are revenue generation activities that we all do in our daily jobs, and then
Mhm.
there's those that are not. And to me, like you look at all of your processes that you do today. I tell people often, like anytime when you touch a paper or you're manually entering information into a spreadsheet, that's where you need technology, right? For sure. That's basic.
Yeah.
You have to build up from there. But like how you're differentiating yourself is by implementing technology where you have non-revenue generation activities. You're saving, like at the end of the day, I tell people our AI agent, we call it, funny enough, surcharge. Surcharge doesn't sleep, right? And surcharge doesn't leave you. Like you said, people leave, right? Yes, like you don't have to spend $20,000 afterwards looking for your new employee because surcharge is always there. And with all of the training and data, it actually gets better over time, right?
Yeah.
Overnight hours, you're not going to, you don't need to wake up people in the middle of the night because surcharge is there. It will make decisions for you. And in the morning, it will provide you information on all of the decisions it's made, all the conversations had. Um, I think like every time like, I feel the next in the age of AI that we're in,
Mhm.
um, the businesses that will ultimately succeed are going to be the ones that optimize all of their non-revenue generation workflows and implement that technology. And it's not realistic for you to think that I'm going to build that technology myself because technology these days moves so fast. I
Yeah.
always tell tell brokers like leave the technology to technology companies who live and breathe that, and you
Yeah.
focus on what you do best, which is moving freight, right?
I think
So yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it boils down to the build versus buy model that's out there, and sometimes it is cheaper to buy something that's already established and already had all the
100%.
kinks work out. And I
Yep.
look at it because I tour warehouses, I go out and visit places, and recently I saw a couple of warehouses that now have a robot that like actually like because the boxes are shipped in, not obviously put together, so they have a robot that
Yeah.
actually starts the packaging process right there, and it's like for an order picking process. So it's like, who out there, and again, I want you can take stock for the anti-technology people out there. Who out there is going to apply for a job where your job is to
Right.
put boxes together and tape them? You're not going to do
Yep.
that, right? So
Right.
I think like
Yep.
that's where you can leverage technology for the future in those non-revenue producing
Yes.
roles that you're talking about there. It's not that you're
Yep.
looking to replace a human being. Now you can get that person out of that mundane role and put them in a
Yep.
job that actually moves the needle for them. I think
Yep.
AI's big, or like an AI company's biggest issues, Marina, is they have they're terrible at marketing. I think that the way that they're marketing it is bad. It's not what it does that's bad. It's how they're marketing it. And that's why I'm telling them all, every AI company out there, talk to your boy. I'll make you guys not sound like such uncompassionate assholes.
Oh, that's right. But I love your point, right? Like, think about the carrier sales rep that you're hiring. Like, is like, are you presenting the job to them as, hey, 20% of your time you're going to sit there and talk to carriers on any of the extra charges or conflicts that come up during transportation? Do you think they're going to like? That's the fancy part of their job?
Yeah, nobody's told.
No.
Yeah, nobody's told that at all. But Marina, how does anybody reach out to you to find out more? We're already at the top of the hour here. These shows always fly by. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on?
Absolutely. Look me up on LinkedIn. Marina D. Brown is my LinkedIn tag. Or you can also get us on our Moniva website. It's Moniva. Ask me next time when we talk how we came up with that name. Moniva.com. But yeah, those are probably the best ways to get on me.
Perfect. Marina, thank you so much for joining me. And if you guys can't find Marina for some reason, just hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with her. As always, you guys, if you guys got value in what you heard today, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Chris.